All right, folks, it's 4:30 on Thursday morning. I've already done my first set, or my first round. We're gonna get after it, talking about Francis Thompson's poem, The Hound of Heaven. We're gonna start in with the section where he says, I sought no more that after which I strayed in face of man or maid, but still within the little children's eyes seemed something that replies, they at least are for me, surely for me. I turned me to them very wistfully, but even as their young eyes grew sudden fair, with dawning answers there, their angel plucked them from me by the hair. That's the shortest section in the entire poem. And I found it interesting that Francis Thompson's poem, The Hound of Heaven, it's included in the 4-volume version of the breviary. In the first volume, at the end of it, there's a section of religious poems. It includes some John Donne, some Gerard Manley Hopkins, obviously, and of course, Thompson's Hound of Heaven. But in the version that's included in there, that section is omitted. It's left out. And I thought that was very interesting. Now, and it's left out of other recordings of it online. And I thought that was interesting. Why is that section chosen to be left out? Let's listen to it again after this next set. I sought no more that after which I strayed in face of man or maid. So, in the last section, he talks about searching for something, shelter from the oncoming search of the hound that's behind him. And he's searching at hearted casements, trellised with intertwining charities. He's looking in human love for an escape from divine love, and not surprisingly, not finding it. Not finding it among grown-ups. He decides, I'm not going to look for it in grown-ups anymore. I sought no more that after which I strayed in face of man or maid, but still within the little children's eyes seemed something that replies, they at least are for me, surely for me. One is tempted to think that the reason this was omitted from some reprints of it is they're afraid that the thing that Francis Thompson is searching for from these children might not be quite correct. That is, his intentions toward the children might be wrong. Quite frankly, we're tempted to think that the editors of these collections are reading a sexual overtone into this poem. I think this is a false reading. To the best of our knowledge, Thompson remained celibate his entire life. And this being Victorian England, the idea of discussing sexuality openly in mainstream literature is somewhat out of place. Now, it was certainly there in the subtext of a lot of literature this time. There definitely is in some Victorian literature a repressed sexuality. But to read this into the poem that Thompson is writing, I think misrepresents it. For one thing, this is the whole burden of the poem is the failure of human love. Or up until this point, the whole failure of the poem, burden of the poem is a failure of human love to satisfy what he is looking for. More than that, if you've ever worked with homeless people, I think it's pretty easy to see what it is that he's talking about. He's looking for love. He's looking for acceptance. What does that look like? It looks like him going up to grown-ups and being turned away. But grown-ups judge on appearances. The grown-ups have a long habit, a practice of not noticing the beggars. Remember, it's the grown-up constables that are turning him away from his beloved library, his one source of comfort that isn't a drug. Children do not yet have this prejudice against the ragged, the unkempt, the unmannerly. Instead, like when we drive through Seattle or Tacoma, my daughters, they'll talk to anybody, especially my oldest one. She'll just talk to any homeless bum on the streets. We grown-ups are very in tune with the security risk, and we're like, don't talk to strangers, stay with mommy and daddy, etc., etc. Now let's look at this section in the context of Victorian England. Kids are not running around on the streets by themselves, but they are going out for walks. They're going out for outings in the park, wherever, and Thompson sees them go by. And the grown-ups, they kind of see him out of peripheral vision and just keep on walking. Don't make eye contact. Kids, they walk along like this. What's that? What's that? What's that? Who's that? Why are they doing that? One wonders if the Victorian habit of children should be seen and not heard was not a response to this childish habit of saying the most inopportune things at the most inopportune time. So Thompson, sitting on the park bench, sitting in the steps or in a doorway, he looks up and sees a group of children go by. Thompson is hungry for love, hungry for acceptance, hungry to be seen and not judged. And so he looks up and he sees this one human being not afraid to make eye contact with him. And so he looks back and he looks into this child's eyes and says, "But just as their young eyes grew sudden fair with dawning answers there, their angel plucked them from me by the hair." And there's some details here that are instructive, I think. For one thing, their eyes grow sudden fair with dawning answers there. He's getting a glimmer, the barest hint of what he's looking for. Somebody to see him as he really is. Or perhaps not as he really is, but as he wishes he could be. If you remember last week, we talked about the despairing refusal to be oneself. Thompson is under no illusions. He knows he is not what he was meant to be. But for a second, this child looks at him, or these children look at him. He uses the plural, as their eyes grew sudden fair. And they see past his exterior, and they see him in a way that the grown-ups never did, as something that's fresh and full of hope. And these children perhaps see in him a reflection of their own boundless potential that he knows he has squandered, but some deep down inside, some part of him hopes that maybe it's not all gone. Maybe there's still some talent, still some vision, still some worth buried in there. But even as their young eyes grew sudden fair, but just as their young eyes grew sudden fair, with dawning answers there, their angel plucked them from me by the hair. Now, the children, he looks up, he sees the children, they look at him, he looks at them. Maybe they start to smile. Maybe one wants to run over and say, "Hi there, how are you?" Or, "Why are you dressed like that?" But who was out with the children? Obviously, their nurse or governess. And she says, "Stay away from that man." The grown-up with her superior knowledge and experience is aware of the security threat, but the children don't even know enough to know to look for. And so she interrupts the moment, grabs the children, and drags them away. We'll notice that Thompson does not blame her. He doesn't say they're demon, they're ogre, they're slave driver, they're taskmaster. He doesn't even say their guardian, their protector. He says their angel. Their angel plucked them from me by the hair. Meaning, he agrees with her decision. He agrees with her assessment that he is not an appropriate person for these children to be talking to. And I've imagined this as a particular episode that happened on a particular occasion, but I imagine it happened fairly regularly, fairly frequently. Human nature being what it is, every time grown-ups walked by, they probably looked the other way. And every time children walked by, until they were taught differently, they probably looked curious. And every time a nurse or a governess saw her children looking, she probably pulled them away. her job, if the master finds out that she let his children talk to a ragged beggar, you might ask, if Thompson agreed with her that he was not appropriate for his children to talk to, doesn't that support the theory that his intentions toward them were not fully honorable? I think no. When a good man is trapped in a sordid vice, in a habit of evil or a habit of sin, this habit immediately begins to work upon his shame and begins to shape his image of himself as someone who is defined by the sin that entangles him. Thompson, being an unusually sensitive human being, being a poet and someone with an imaginative nature who readily and exquisitely sees the way that other human beings see him, is going to be very susceptible to this. He fully accepts the sentence of shame. He fully accepts that I am not worthy. Not because of any harm that he plans, but because he views himself as contaminated and polluted. And we do not let things that are contaminated and polluted touch things that are innocent and pure. That's just human nature. And I've seen this before in the jail. Folks who will be convinced that they shouldn't even be around their own children because they're not worthy. Not that they have any idea of specific harm to their children, but because they're just dirty. They feel dirty, they feel unworthy and ashamed. And because of that, they say, better they just stay away from me. Or better I stay away from them. Better they don't know what I really am. And I think this is where Thompson's agreement with the angel and why he calls her an angel. Thompson was not a naive idealist, despite his sensitive nature, his poetic tendencies. He lived and he wrestled with demons every day. And for a good part of his life, they trounced him. They held the upper hand. And he knew that in the Bible, angels are not the cuddling, fluffy bunnies that we make them in our modern world. The trend that was already beginning in the Victorian era in the arts towards turning angels into pets. He knew that it was an angel, the angel of death, that went through Egypt and slew all the firstborn. It was an angel that came down upon the Assyrians and killed 10,000 in one night. Now, calluses are done for the day. So an angel is just. An angel is good. An angel is stern. And this angel took the children and led them away from the ragged man on the street corner to protect them. We, from the outside, can argue whether or not she was right to do so, whether that's a good way to teach the children charity toward their fellow man, whether she was just acting on the prejudices of her society, the highly classist society of urban Victorian England. But Thompson does not argue this. He accepts her judgment and says, I am not worthy. Their angel plucked them from me by the hair. And that's all in that section. This is the only section of the poem that doesn't end with unhurrying chase and unperturbed pace in the first half of the poem. And I think it doesn't stand alone in itself, because the very next line of the next section is, come then, ye other children, natures. But we'll get into that next time. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, like, subscribe, share the video, and we'll see you next time.